What's up, everybody? Damien here, and in today's gaming news, several signs point to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth possibly being a sales dud, a new patch is coming to Dragon's Dogma 2, and Helldivers 2 players demonstrate once again they're doing their part. This is your Daily Fix. Presented by Fallout. Stream all episodes now, only on Prime Video. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth launched as a PlayStation 5 exclusive at the end of February and was met with critical acclaim. IGN's review, for example, awarded Square Enix's latest a 9 out of 10. But since the game's launch, there has been a growing concern about the possible discrepancy between its critical and sales successes. First of all, Square Enix has yet to announce any sales figures for Rebirth, the second game in a planned trilogy of remakes of the seminal Final Fantasy VII. This in itself is telling. The company did announce launch sales for recent Final Fantasy games. For example, Final Fantasy XVI, a fellow PS5 exclusive, sold over 3 million copies during its first week on sale. Going back further, Square Enix announced Final Fantasy VII Remake shifted 3.5 million copies in 3 days when it launched as a PlayStation 4 exclusive in April 2020. Even further, Final Fantasy XV sold 5 million units in its first day, but that game launched on PS4 and Xbox One in November 2016. 15 remains the fastest selling game in the history of the series. So far, Square Enix has said nothing about Rebirth sales, and we're now coming up on 2 months since its release. Based on the publisher's previous sales announcements, you'd expect Square Enix would have made an announcement by now if sales of Rebirth had been positive. The conjecture around the game's sales was given a shot in the arm when analyst Daniel Ahmad, director of research and insights at Nico Partners, tweeted to say Rebirth was underperforming sales-wise and that it was selling about half of what Remake sold in the same time frame. In the UK, GamesIndustry.biz head honcho Christopher Dring reported that Rebirth launch sales were down 34% over the Remake launch, but up 6% over the launch sales of Final Fantasy XVI. How about in Japan? We have hard data for physical game sales there, but not download sales information. Still, going by physical sales, we can see Rebirth has had a tough time compared to other recent Final Fantasy games. Rebirth moved 262,656 copies compared to Final Fantasy XVI's 336,000 sold. It's an even less rosy picture when compared to other Final Fantasy games. Final Fantasy VII Remake, for example, sold nearly 703,000 copies at launch in Japan, whereas Final Fantasy XV sold over 716,000 copies. So it's been a steady sales decline of physical Final Fantasy games in Japan. We know that Rebirth was the second most downloaded game on the PlayStation Store in February, both in the US and Europe, but fell to 11th place in March. So if sales really are down, what could be the cause? Well, Final Fantasy VII Remake was released in 2020, 6 years into the life of the PS4, which had a bigger install base at the time than the PS5 does now. It was also in the midst of the pandemic when people were staying home and playing a lot more video games. Oh, and Rebirth is $10 more than Remake was. Then there's the whole business of the name. With Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's pretty clear what you're getting. But the second part, which arrived 4 years later, is called Rebirth. There could be some confusion there. Perhaps Square Enix should have gone with Remake Chapter 2 or something along those lines. So how about it? Are you one of the potentially fewer people who bought Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Let us know in the comments why or why not. Moving on, Capcom has detailed an upcoming patch for Dragon's Dogma 2 that makes a number of changes and fixes, but there's no mention of the performance mode so many players are waiting for. Following the release of the sprawling action RPG in March, players experienced inconsistent frame rate performance, particularly on PC. Whereas games like the aforementioned Final Fantasy VII Rebirth give players a performance or graphics mode option, Dragon's Dogma 2 only has one visual mode across consoles. Now, Capcom has announced an upcoming Dragon's Dogma 2 patch due out later in April and confirmed what it sets out to do, but players shouldn't expect a performance mode. What is included is a nerf to the pesky dragonsplague illness, which turns pawns murderous but only exhibits a few subtle symptoms up to that point. Elsewhere, there are adjustments to pawns' behavior and dialogue, including a tweak to make it less likely for pawns to fall off cliffs. There's also a note about reducing the frequency of some pawn dialogue, which should make them a little less annoying to be around. Unlike with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Capcom did announce that Dragon's Dogma 2 sold 2.5 million copies in 11 days. And finally today, it took Helldivers 2 players less than 24 hours to complete its latest major order to kill 2 billion Terminids. On April 18th, developer Arrowhead triggered the next step in the Helldivers 2 ongoing galactic war after the PC and PlayStation 5 co-op shooters community successfully completed a major order to slow a significant automaton invasion. Game Master Joel turned players' attention to the Terminid front with the biggest kill order since the game's explosive launch in February. Players were given 6 days to kill 2 billion Terminids, which sounded like an insurmountable task, but players said, "Hold my beer." So fast was progress that some wondered if the Terminid kill tracker was bugged, pun intended. Today, April 19th, the major order is complete and medals have been dished out to players as a reward. Cementing the achievement is an in-universe message from the official Helldivers 2 Twitter account. 2 billion bugs dead in less than a day. Helldivers, Terminid planets run red with liberty thanks to this inspiring display of preemptive self-defense. Your designated loved one / relative / pet / neighbor on Super Earth has been informed of your bravery. And so, Helldivers 2 players head into the weekend without a major order to work towards, which means it's weapons-free time for the community. Kill automatons or Terminids or whatever you fancy. And that is your daily fix for Friday, April 19th. Now that you're caught up on the news, check out this week's Next Gen Console Watch on the different approaches PlayStation and Xbox are taking with their next pieces of hardware. I'm Damon Hatfield, and for all your video game news, stay tuned to IGN.